My name is Siri Porn. I'm 74 years old, and I want to tell you something that changed the way I understand my whole life. For many years, I believed every thought that came into my mind. If a thought told me I was not enough, I believed it. If a thought told me I had failed, I carried that pain for days. If a thought made me fear the future, I treated that fear like a warning I had to obey. I did not know there was another way to live. I did not know I could have thoughts without becoming them. I did not know I could feel fear without calling myself a fearful person. I did not know I could witness pain without building my identity around it. But once I saw clearly that I am not my mind, something inside me began to soften. And I say soften because that is what it felt like, not dramatic, not sudden like a storm, more like a tight knot slowly loosening after years of being pulled too hard. I was not raised in a way that taught me to question my thoughts. I was raised to keep going. I worked in a small local market for most of my life. I raised my children mostly alone. I worried about money, food, school, sickness, rent, and all the ordinary problems that can slowly make a person live with constant tension. When life feels heavy for many years, the mind becomes very loud. It comments on everything. It predicts danger. It remembers old pain. It compares, it judges, it creates stories. And because I was always busy, always tired, always responsible for something, I never stopped long enough to notice that my mind was doing all this. I simply assumed that whatever it said must be true. You see, this is what many people do without realizing it. A thought comes, and they believe it immediately. A fear appears, and they build a whole future around it. A memory returns, and they feel trapped inside something that happened years ago. The mind says, "You are alone," and they believe they are truly alone. The mind says, "You are too late," and they believe life has passed them by. The mind says, "No one sees you," and they carry that hurt in the body as if it were a permanent fact. That was me for a very long time. After my children were grown, the noise of daily survival became quieter, and I thought that would bring relief. I thought once I had fewer responsibilities, my mind would finally rest. But the opposite happened. The silence gave my thoughts more space. I started noticing how restless I was inside. Old worries stayed with me, even when there was nothing urgent happening. My body could be sitting still, but my mind was rushing through memories, regrets, and future fears. Honestly, that confused me. I thought external pressure had been the main reason for my suffering. But when life became less demanding and the tension stayed, I had to face something difficult. The pressure was not only outside me. A great part of it was inside. That was one of the reasons I began spending time at the temple. At first, I did not go there to study something deep. I went because I was tired, and because the quiet of the temple felt different from the quiet of my house. It felt held somehow, safe enough for me to begin seeing what I had spent years avoiding. I listened to teachings. I sat in silence. I watched my breath. And little by little, I started noticing something very important. Thoughts were always moving, but there was also something in me that was noticing the thoughts. Fear would rise, but there was also a part of me that could see the fear. Sadness would come, but there was also an awareness that was not itself sad. At first, I did not know how to describe this. I only knew that something was different. Let me explain in a simple way. For most of my life, when a painful thought came, I became the thought. If the mind said, "You are a burden," I felt like a burden. If the mind said, "You have wasted your life," I believed I had wasted it. If the mind said, "You are not loved," I carried that as if it were the final truth about me. But once I began to observe my inner life more carefully, I saw that a thought is something that appears. It stays for a while, and then it changes or fades. If it can come and go, how can it be who I truly am? What most people don't realize is that the mind is constantly moving, but something in us is able to watch that movement. That watcher is quieter, more spacious, less dramatic. And when we begin to rest there, everything changes. This did not happen to me all at once. I did not sit down one day and become completely free. I began by noticing very small things. I would feel anxious, and instead of saying, "I am broken," I would say to myself, "Anxiety is here." I would feel loneliness, and instead of saying, "This is all I am now," I would notice, "Loneliness is passing through me." That small change in language created space, and space created relief. Not total relief, not instantly, but enough to breathe. Enough to not drown in every emotion that visited me. And here's what I didn't understand then. The suffering was not only coming from the thoughts themselves, it was coming from the way I merged with them. I gave them my name. I gave them my identity. I turned passing weather into permanent truth. Once I began to see that clearly, my relationship with the mind changed. I stopped trying to control every thought. I stopped treating every difficult emotion like evidence that something was wrong with me. I stopped believing that healing meant never having a negative thought again. That was a huge relief, because for years I had been trying to become a person with only calm thoughts. And that is not how the human mind works. You know what surprised me most? The mind became less frightening once I stopped treating it like my master. I still have thoughts. Of course I do. I still have days when my mind is busy, when old memories come back, when fear tries to tell me a story about what is going to happen next. But now I know how to meet those moments differently. I do not immediately kneel before every thought and call it truth. I notice it. I breathe. I let it be there without giving it the final word. That is a very different way to live. This realization also changed how I looked at other people. For much of my life, I reacted quickly when someone spoke harshly or behaved in a cold way. I took things personally very easily. But once I saw how the mind creates pain, I also saw that other people are often trapped in their own thoughts in the same way. They believe their anger. They believe their fear. They believe the stories they tell themselves about the world. That did not make me excuse everything, but it gave me more compassion. It helped me stop seeing every difficult person as an enemy. Sometimes they were simply lost inside their own minds, the same way I had been lost inside mine for years. There is another side to this realization that matters very much. When you no longer believe you are your mind, you stop building your whole identity out of your wounds. For many years, I quietly described myself by my pain. I was the woman who had struggled, the woman who had been left with too much, the woman who had endured. There was truth in those things, yes. They were part of my story, but they were not my deepest self. Once I saw that, I began to feel lighter. I did not need to deny my past, but I no longer needed to live inside it all the time. The mind likes to build a self out of old suffering. Awareness allows that self to loosen. What most people don't realize is that freedom does not always arrive as excitement. Sometimes it arrives as less tightness, less panic, less urgency to fix yourself. That is how it came for me. I did not become a different woman overnight. I became a gentler one, a more patient one, a less frightened one. I began to understand that I could have a hard day without turning it into an identity. I could have a painful thought without believing that thought spoke for my whole life. I could feel sorrow and still be held by something deeper than sorrow. Now, at 74, I can tell you this with honesty. You are not the voice in your head. You are not every fear that crosses your mind. You are not every memory that returns at night. You are not your worst thought. You are not your most painful emotion. These things are real experiences, yes, but they are not your deepest truth. There is an awareness in you that can witness all of it. And when you begin to rest there, even a little, life changes. The outer circumstances may not change immediately. Problems may still exist. Loss may still come. But inwardly, you stop being dragged in the same way. You become less easy to shake. That is why this realization changes everything. It changes how you suffer. It changes how you heal. It changes how you speak to yourself when pain appears. It changes how you see the future. It changes how you hold the past. It even changes how you pray, how you sit, how you breathe. Because once you know you are not your mind, you stop trying to solve yourself only at the level of thought. You begin to value stillness, presence, awareness. You begin to trust that there is something in you deeper than mental noise. If these words are landing somewhere tender in you today, stay with that. Do not rush away. Notice your own mind in the next hour. Watch how quickly it tries to label, judge, predict, and define you. Then remember gently that noticing is already a kind of freedom. The one who notices is not the same as the thought being noticed. That small shift can open a whole new life. And if this message speaks to something you have carried for a long time, stay close to this space. If you want, tell me in the comments what thought or feeling you have been identifying with for too long. Sometimes naming it is the first step in loosening its hold. And if you want to keep walking through these quiet realizations with me, remain here. Not to become someone new, but to slowly remember the self that exists beneath the noise.